All right, this is episode 7 of Just Press Pause. I'm Andrew Kozak. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Today's episode in the CYP Club is all about the Columbus Young Professionals Club. Now, the CYP Club was formed back in 2005, and in the last 15 years, it has grown to become single-handedly the largest young professionals organization in the entire country. That's pretty incredible. CEO and founder Grosso is going to join me on the podcast and not only just talk about the CYP Club, but also talk about how you can become an integral part of your community, whether you're established or if you're thinking about moving to a new city. It's something I hold dear to my heart since I've been part of a young professionals group now for just about the last 15 years, joining the Young Professionals of Wichita back in 2005 and the Young Professionals of Tulsa back in 2010. So I'm real excited to have Derek Grosso join me on the podcast. That's coming up in just a little bit. You know, speaking of that, I've lived all over the country, and many of those places like Memphis, Tulsa, Wichita, tracking thunderstorms as a meteorologist in the spring and summer is almost part of a daily routine. You just get used to it. Like many things in life, thunderstorms, they're not one size fits all. So sure, we have severe and non-severe thunderstorms, but did you know there are actually 4 different types of thunderstorms out there? I'm going to break them down and talk about them in today's water cooler weather. Okay, so first things first, it's essential to know that all thunderstorms essentially begin the same way, as cumulus clouds. Now, these clouds continue to grow as moist parcels of air rise, expand, and then cool, causing water vapor to condense into cloud droplets, ice crystals, and then eventually rain. Now, these updrafts of rising air end up being what feeds the thunderstorm. Then on the other side of that, once precipitation begins to fall, it carries a downward momentum of air known as the downdraft. Sometimes we feel the downdraft, I'll say, or sometimes other meteorologists will say that rain-cooled air that you can feel, that's the actual downdraft of the thunderstorm that you are feeling. It's this downdraft mechanism, by the way, that essentially kills the thunderstorm. Many times in the springtime and summertime pop-up thunderstorms, the updraft that creates the thunderstorm eventually gets overtaken by the downdraft, and that kind of shuts off the fuel line for the thunderstorm. It fizzles out and it dies. So that's sort of the lifespan of a typical thunderstorm in a nutshell. Now let's get into the 4 different types of thunderstorms that we can see. First up, the single cell thunderstorm. These are common. These are sort of the summertime pop-up, or sometimes we call them popcorn thunderstorms. They're extremely common in the spring and summer. They can be severe, but they're usually not. They'll give us some heavy rain, gusty winds, and hail. We watch them, of course, lightning and thunder too, but they usually fizzle out and die, especially when the heating of the day and the sunset moves in. Next up, the multi-cell thunderstorm. Now this one's a little different. Multi-cell thunderstorms could be made up of multiple single-cell thunderstorms. They'll have the heavy rain, the gusty winds, and the hail, along with the lightning and thunder. What concerns us most about multi-cell thunderstorms is when they form a little bit of a crowd of a line of storms, and that means that we could see training. What is training? Training is where the same areas underneath thunderstorms will get the heavy rain over and over again as these storms kind of train all over each other. And that could give us flash flooding. So when it comes to multi-cell thunderstorms, with the normal risks that single cells have, we also look for flash flooding. Now, next up, and these are starting to get more intense, squall line thunderstorms. Now, squall line thunderstorms are made up of a large line of severe thunderstorms that can stretch for literally hundreds of miles. Now, in addition to the heavy rain, the gusty winds, the hail, the lightning and thunder, and even a couple of spin-up tornadoes, our main concern with squall line thunderstorms is the bow echo. Sometimes on the radar, we can see a bow echo forming. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll show you an illustration of that. That would signal extremely intense straight line winds. And in some cases, I've actually tracked squall line thunderstorms that have produced 60 to 100 mile per hour winds. And in some cases, these straight line winds can actually cause more damage than a weak tornado. So squall line thunderstorms are definitely something we take very seriously. And that leads us to the most intense and the most serious thunderstorm there is. You've definitely heard it before, the supercell thunderstorm. No doubt you've heard all of the meteorologists use it. We track those in the spring and summer, year-round, all 50 states. Supercells, they get set apart from regular thunderstorms because of their rotating updraft. Remember the updraft part of the thunderstorm? Well, when it rotates, it becomes way more organized. Sometimes that rotation is weak. Sometimes it's not. And when it's not, it has a better chance of forming tornadoes. That rotation can transfer to the ground. And when it forms a funnel cloud, and when the rotating column of air known as a funnel cloud makes contact with the ground, well, then we call it a tornado. Sometimes on radar, by the way, supercells have sort of a hook appearance. That hooko can also signal the organized rotation when it comes to those thunderstorms, and also point out where we could possibly see a tornado. Very interesting stuff. I'm actually going to expand on this a little bit more in an upcoming weather blog. Watch my Facebook and Twitter pages for the link to that. Go to facebook.com/Andrew Kozak TV or Twitter, and you can check me out there at Andrew Kozak TV. I'll be posting the links pretty shortly. In the meantime, there is your water cooler weather. Let's get to today's guest.
You're listening to the Just Press Pause podcast with Andrew Kozak.
He is the co-founder of Second Date Social, the CEO of the Columbus Young Professionals, the owner of City Venture Holdings, the founder of the Columbus Impact Academy, and the publisher of City Pulse Guides. I need a sheet just to name everything. Derek Grosso, thank you so much for joining me here on Just Press Pause.
Absolutely. Anytime you need it, like I said, I'm here for you.
So you are kind of the jack of all trades. You've done so much in the, 15 or 16 years that you've been here in Columbus.
Yes, it's coming up on 15 years in Columbus, originally from the East Coast, grew up in New York, and went to school in Washington, D.C., George Washington, shout out to the Colonials, and then moved everything over to Columbus, started up a business, and CYP Club came quickly after that.
CYP Club has been really just an amazing thing for Columbus. Doing a little bit of research, all you have to do is type it in. You see the slew of different events, volunteer opportunities. The club now has been in operation since 2005, and it has grown right now to the largest young professionals organization in the entire country. Tell me about that, and tell me about that milestone that you reach.
Thank you so much. It's definitely been an adventure, lots of ups and downs, just like any other entrepreneurial venture. But really, when I started the organization in 2005, I was new to Columbus. I was looking to meet new people, to build my business connections, to get to know the city, to give back, all the things that we do now, 15 years later, and we have done over the last decade and a half. So the CYP Club really came about as a way for people to make those connections. And it's something that a lot of cities have something similar. And in Columbus, there are a few dozen organizations that are focused on things like real estate and region, geography, industry. So a lot of these things are going on around the country, and we try to connect with all of them, or as many as we can. But in terms of what we've done with the CYP Club, people have come to me over the years and asked me questions, and I've been able to consult and start up about 50 different initiatives or programs around the country. So I've learned a lot. I've connected with a lot of people, and through that, learning who's doing what, who's not doing certain things, and what organizations are growing, which organizations, their size, their membership, their programs, their impact. And we looked at all that, and consistently it's been, we are the largest in the nation, which is really, really humbling and really cool for the city of Columbus as well.
But it's incredible. So I'm kind of in a nomadic business. So I'm from Staten Island, so we're basically neighbors from our hometowns. But I moved to Casper, Wyoming, very small city. And then when I moved to Wichita, I immediately joined the Young Professionals of Wichita at the end of 2005. And that was sort of a startup. We were very small, but we grew. And by the time I left Wichita in 2010, the organization had kind of exploded, especially for, a city of that size. It's got to be really rewarding, though, to take a look at all the different cities, especially those smaller cities, the Midwest cities, the one that have those brain drains, they call it. Columbus is not a brain drain city. That's kind of the advantage that we have here.
Yeah, Columbus, when I moved here in 2005, the city, the mayor at the time, the Chamber of Commerce, they were all coming together because Columbus has and probably continues to have one of the largest populations per capita of college students. And in terms of brain drain, really, we've got about 50 or 60 different colleges and universities. We've obviously got the big one, the Ohio State University. So we really wanted to, at the time, and obviously now, keep and retain the best and the brightest, and then also attract people from outside of the region, outside of the city. And, we were fortunate we got in partially at the right time, but I think had the right mixture of really trying to do new things and and be fun and be nimble and bring people together, versus a lot of organizations where I'll see they're started by a parent organization, or they are a part of an affiliate or a chapter. And so those things are great, but sometimes those things hinder the growth of organizations. Other times they allow them to explode. So the cities that you're talking about, really just trying to think of the future. So we got in about the right time. People were talking about brain drain. How do we attract and retain? How do we make the city or keep the city cool? And at the same time that I was moving here, I'm looking to do the same things myself. I want to build, my brand. I want to really grow my network and meet people and do fun things. And that's really what it's all about. So as you find these organizations around the country, just like any other, you have to think ahead. And I say this all the time, you have to have a purpose, a plan for success. You have to have the right people. And we've had some great people. And we have a 9 staff member team and about 50 volunteers as part of our board of directors, and probably about 200 different businesses and organizations that we work with that help fund the CYP Club so that we can keep the membership free and accessible. And that's one of the competitive advantages and one of the value adds that we have.
Because some cities they charge. I mean, some cities, in order to be a member of an organization like this. But you know what I find interesting, having lived all over, Derek, I think that a lot of those cities that charge, because they don't have those community sponsorships and they don't have those community partnerships, I think a lot of times when you start up a young professionals organization, you're met with a little bit of resistance sometimes from those older business leaders. Did you find that here initially, or you think people here were a little bit more open?
People here were very, very much more open. And I've started organizations in probably about a dozen different states. And I've helped, like I said, create or develop about 50 of them. And I found that in other cities where a lot of people who are younger, emerging leaders, high potential associates are kind of positioned as, and I like to call this the kids' table at Thanksgiving. Oh, I'm glad that you've got the energy. Oh, I'm glad that you've got the idea, but you need to sit at this table and let the adults speak.
Right.
In Columbus, that wasn't really the case. In some places, sure, in the city, but I was met with, for the most part, open arms, and really the way that Columbus bills itself, and it really is open and smart.
I haven't seen, it's so funny because I haven't seen a city, and I'm just starting to get more involved myself now. I moved here trying to start up, Spectrum. We started up the news organization right from the start. So that took a lot of time, still does. But it's amazing to see a community with so many leaders that embrace new things, because sometimes new sometimes it equates to scary, especially for people that are kind of already ingrained in the community. So it really is kind of refreshing to see that. And I think that you having the drive that you have and having the kind of wit about you to be able to not only create this here but also consult for so many other places, you're coming from a place where you didn't see so much resistance, so it's easier to implement all those new ideas, all those new programs. You've grown to the largest organization. How many members do we have right now?
It kind of, when you add everything up, I look at membership, and I don't count social media followers because that would add another 50 or 60,000 people. In terms of membership, we have between 22, 23,000. Of course, people age out, they move out of town, they lose interest, and that's just natural, but we are gaining people. At the current moment with the pandemic, it's obviously become much harder to attract people because we're not able to host.
And that's what I was going to talk to you about, because, you guys have done so many different events. I started to look and try to start getting involved right as the pandemic hit, and saw there was a lot of different events that you guys had. And then everything had to be shut down, along with pretty much, the entire city, state, world. So how are you navigating through that? And how are you guys continuing to attain and retain members?
Thanks for asking. We have tried our best to see how we could weather the storm. I've always been a forward thinker with business and with what I do. And so you always have to plan for a rainy day, the future. Obviously, you can't plan for something like this. So the last couple of months, we've been trying to really talk to our members and communicate with them and be decisive. We quickly said we're not going to be doing any in-person events, even when it was a little bit more of a recommendation than it was a stay-at-home order. We host in a given year about 150 different events. We organize events that bring a few dozen people, a few hundred people, and up to a few thousand people in attendance. So it's really difficult to obviously do those events that are a few hundred or a few thousand And as we look at the festival season, we have another event that welcomes around 20,000 people over the summer that is right now on ice. But we've successfully, all things considered, converted and pivoted a lot of our events to virtual events. So we're doing this event actually later today, but every Friday, we are hosting what we call the Stay at Home series. And it's about an hour-long webinar, and we bring in some of our friends and our board members to discuss different topics, such as navigating employment, unemployment, impacting the community, how you can help. And since you have 20,000, 23,000 members, you want to give people the opportunity to do something, but also realize that a lot of people are unaware of what they can do. They're unable. They may be out of a job. They may be facing financial, uncertainty. So we want to be helpful in that regard, but we also want to make sure that we know we don't have all the answers, and we're certainly not going to be doing any big events anytime soon. And I think that's smart. We've started out taking a lot of our events where we had discussions and coffee talk, morning conversations where you'd have some ability to network and connect, and then learn and listen and interact. And so we pivoted a lot of those to these either 30-minute or 60-minute stay-at-home events, again, every Friday at noon, with different topics. Then we thought, okay, well, there's also the opportunity for us to do things that are a little bit more quick bites. So shorter, really check in with people. We have a lot of friends and a lot of followers, and obviously a lot of members, but we wanted to give members access to those leaders. As you mentioned earlier, Columbus and Central Ohio, we are very blessed. We have lots of accessibility. So we decided to do these 10-minute or so Instagram live chats, which at first they were a little bit, I would say maybe nerve-wracking. Mm-hmm. Another one of my board members, Mary Austin, she's been phenomenal. And really just talking to folks like yourself, community and business leaders, about what they're doing, how they're doing it, how are they, dealing with staying at home? How are they dealing with, but also just, what are things that inspire you? What are things that, we should just know about, so that we're not acting as if things are normal, but we can kind of have some semblance of normalcy in terms of talking to people, so that it's not all about, okay, how are you dealing with coronavirus?
Right.
And how are you pivoting, or how are you looking at stay-at-home orders?
Because
lifting,
even though on the surface that's not negative, it gets exhausting after a while just talking about that. So having somebody, or having different people, multiple people, talk about not just how they're dealing with it, but what they're doing in spite of it, I think also is kind of inspiring. So what I wanted to ask you too today is, what message would you give other cities that have YP organizations that are a little bit on the struggling side? I have friends that live all over the country, and some of them want to get involved in young professionals organizations, and either they don't exist, or they did exist and it fizzled out, or they just have trouble keeping members. What do you say to those people?
I would say that the first thing is focus on collaboration, because collaboration is key. It's been key to my business and building our organization. And, when you look at where we've come, 15 years as an organization seems like a lifetime. But for other people, it's a blink of an eye. You've got organizations that are over 100 years, like the Better Business Bureau of Central Ohio and Rotary clubs. But ultimately, I try to tell people that if you're looking to start something out, I kind of give them this 4 Ps of starting a YPO. There's having the right people, having a purpose, having a plan for success, and then having a plan for succession, because we know that at some point we're not going to be young professionals forever. But if those 4 Ps don't align for organizations and people around the country, and if you can't find an organization, you can potentially look to start something. Mm-hmm. I look at create some programming or look at partnership. Those are the other 2 Ps.
Well, and the funny thing too is, in those cities that I've lived in that have had successful YP organizations, and I'm sure you see it too, people that may have been skeptical 10, 15 years ago, they're now working at companies where those folks that were in the young professionals are now old professionals, working in those companies and taking them to success. I mean, it's just all a part of growth. I mean, I'll be honest, I stayed in Wichita for 5 years. If they didn't have the young professionals organization, these people were some of the best friends I made in my life. I may not have stayed as long as I ended up staying. So these organizations, it's more than just, okay, here's something to do curricular outside of work. Here's meeting at a bar. I mean, there's plenty of social events, but there's a lot of volunteer opportunities as well. That's one of the things I thought that really excited me about your website that showed all the programs, especially obviously when I first
Yeah.
joined before the COVID-19, how many different volunteer opportunities there are, and there's also like pop-up ones. So you don't have to be really ingrained
Yeah.
in it just yet. You can quickly sign up and do it. Tell me about partnering with some of those volunteer organizations around town.
Absolutely. We have really three different focus areas for the organization. There are events, which I mentioned. We run and organize nearly 30 different recreational sports leagues, so they're athletics. And of course, we're not doing any sports leagues at this current moment. And then there's impact, which encompasses things like philanthropy and volunteerism, but also just education and awareness. And so we've created events where people can learn about nonprofits, and there are over 7,000 in the city of Columbus alone. Learn about nonprofits one-on-one or from a panel discussion. But in terms of volunteerism, you can't really do big events for volunteers. You really want to keep it small so that you can have a group of 10 or 20 or 30 people. And we have a board called CYP Club Cares and some fantastic leaders who are helping develop and lead that. We donate in a given year nearly 8,000 volunteer hours and about $115,000 that is in-kind donations. So all through the CYP Club, we're trying to give people access to small group volunteer activities that are just pop-ups, like making cookies for the Ronald McDonald House, or maybe doing a park cleanup. And then we also have some events that really give people the opportunity to look ahead, building furniture or getting involved with being on board on a nonprofit board, which a lot of people want to do, but don't necessarily know how to start.
And the nice thing about that is you can join those boards as a young professional. And when you age out, those are things that you could stay on for really your entire professional career.
Exactly. And oftentimes with those organizations, you've got folks who are a little bit older, not going to lie, but they're looking for new blood. They're looking for new ideas and younger people. And a lot of the younger people are looking for these opportunities. So when you put them together, it allows some new, fresh ideas to come to the table and help innovate with some of these nonprofits that might be struggling and some of these organizations that really need more help, especially now more than ever. Mm-hmm. But they are looking for these organizations are looking for people. And that's what we have.
It really, and it just gives you that sense of community pride. I mean, some of my friends kind of give me some, joke with me a little bit because it seems like every city I go to, I really want to take pride in it. And there's some cities that, give you more opportunities than others. But I got to tell you, and no one from Columbus is paying me to say this. I'm sure no one's paying you either to say it, but it's really, truly amazing having lived all over. And you and I are from the largest metropolitan area in the entire country, one of the largest in the world. But to see a community like Columbus embrace so many new things, so many great things, and to give very little resistance to new ideas, I think that's part of the reason why this city thrives the way it does.
I think, and we have a long laundry list of really great innovators and entrepreneurs, and some say it's in the water in and around Columbus. Going back to the Dave Thomases of founding of Wendy's, and some of the companies that started in their maybe like 50, 60, 70 years back. But you look at that and you think these large brands, really in Columbus, Scotts Miracle-Gro, Abercrombie and Fitch, Express, L Brands, the list goes on. And at the same time, these organizations are looking to build and recruit their talent base. So whether they come from Ohio State or they come from other parts of the country or other parts of the world, they're coming to Columbus. And really, they're looking to make their mark and meet people. And I think that's what we all want to do. We want to be a part of a community. As big as the city of Columbus is, or as big as the city of New York is, you want to be a part of something, but you also want to be able to have access so that you don't feel like just a number.
Well, it's like the old saying, being a big fish in a small bowl or a small fish in a huge bowl. I feel like, and this is not knocking New York, because there's nothing like New York City. Everybody can admit that.
New York.
Love New York, but it is so much more difficult in a city like New York to make an impact and make a difference. You just have so many people, so many different things. Columbus is not a small town, but it's just that perfect size where you could come in here and really take a nice bite out of it and give something back and make an impact and help contribute to the success of this very growing city. We might be talking in 10 or 20 years from now, and Columbus is, the way it's growing, it may be well on its way to, a mini New York. But for now, it is, I feel like it's the perfect size. Derek, before we start wrapping things up, I do want to talk about Second Date Social because that is something that you started as well. That's for, YP organizations. Sometimes people meet in those and that ends up being a good thing, but it's not a meat market type of organization. But the Second
Exactly.
Date Social is actually an organization that you created to actually go and help people date in Columbus.
Yes. So CYP Club has been around 15 years, and I've been invited to many weddings. Nobody's, so there are a lot of people who've met through the organization and dated and fallen in love and got married and had kids, and nobody's named their kids after me yet. I don't know. They don't like them. But we've made some really outstanding connections. However, as the organization is a social club and it's a networking organization and a volunteer network and athletic league coordinator, I never wanted it to be an organization where people who were married or dating felt like they were all singles. And even though majority of the members of the CYP Club are single, we never hosted singles events. So you fast forward to, me meeting my wife, who actually happens to be an executive matchmaker, and she's connecting thousands of singles across the Midwest. So she and we've been married for 3 years now, and we decided we wanted to go into business together, and we created a new organization that was not just for young professionals, but for all ages from 20s through 50s and 60s, called Second Date Social, which is really a new way of meeting people for dating purposes, for the ability to build friendships and meet, as we say, peers and potential matches. And we're looking at some really cool platforms right now. And I'd love to talk with you in a couple of weeks because we'll have some big news as well with respect to Second Date Social, because we haven't been able to do any events, of course.
I was going to say it's probably been a very big challenge. Before I wrap up, though, for anybody that's listening, of course, this is on iTunes, or I guess now they call it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You want to head on over to YouTube on my channel because I'm going to be throwing up links. We'll talk about the links, but it's easier, obviously, if you see it on screen. So for people that want to visit CYP Club, the website, let's throw that up there. Let's talk a little bit about how people can get involved and join.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, membership is free, and you get invited to all of the events, activities. Some have a fee, some are free. The sports leagues, the volunteer activities. It's cypclub.com. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We also have a YouTube page. They're all at CYP Club. So if you search for Columbus Young Professionals Club, there's a couple of other Columbuses around the nation. There's Columbus, Georgia, Columbus, Indiana, and there are young professional groups there. But we are in Columbus, Ohio, of course. So Columbus Young Professionals Club is cypclub.com.
And I realize a lot of people that may be watching or listening aren't from Columbus, but I hope they learned something today that, you can go into a new place and make such an impact. And you're
totally.
a perfect example of that with all the different things. And I'm sure if we catch up with you in 5, 10, 15 years, just to add to the list of what you've done, I'm sure it'll be pretty incredible. Before we go, Derek, I'm going to do something with you that I've done with all my guests so far on Just Press Pause, and that is rapid fire. First question is, what is your favorite vacation destination, perhaps a place that you would like to visit when things return back to normal?
Absolutely. I love the beach. I grew up on the Long Island Sound, and one of the first places I want to go is to visit my parents and my family in New York, but also looking down south along the North South Carolinas, Florida, and really somewhere tropical that I can sit with my wife and my daughter and just enjoy the water coming in and the beach, the sea, the sand.
And with the summer right now, it's like we're just kind of chomping at the bit to be able to travel and do all of that, especially with the warmer weather that's here. So the second question I had, you actually answered. What was the first thing you'd want to do when things open back up? So that was that one. Let me ask you this. What is your favorite movie scene of all time? And you don't have to love the entire movie.
Yeah.
But it is your favorite scene.
There's so many. Recently, you're looking at Avengers Endgame, and you've got obviously I don't want to give spoilers, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure everybody's seen this movie at one point. At this point,
I think you're safe. Yeah.
Yeah. So really bringing it all together. So inspirational when Cap has got Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, but also going back to Gladiator. Any scene in Gladiator, any scene in The Godfather, any scene in Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of comedies, but also I guess all the G movies. Really just, I've got so many movies in my mind. My brother and I and a lot of friends from where I grew up, sometimes we just talk in movie quotes. We text each other random movie quotes and text back and forth, or we'll call each other. We won't have actual conversations. We'll just do movie quotes back and forth and just funny soundbite things. So,
and you can get what each of you is saying, I'm sure.
Inspiration. Yep. Inspirational and exciting movies.
It's funny you mentioned The Godfather. I was just talking about mob movies and mafia movies with some friends of mine.
Goodfellas, another G movie, right?
Great movie.
Not G-rated, but you know.
No, definitely not G. I was going to say not G-rated for anybody that wasn't sure what he was talking about. I love the end, not the actual ending, but the penultimate ending in the movie Casino, when they played House of Rising Sun, and everybody kind of gets their comeuppance, and you know, from the guy that escaped down to Costa Rica and they're chasing after him in his home, to Sharon Stone, who played Sharon Stone was excellent in that movie, and she's scraping her nails against the cinder block walls, and she just dies from a drug overdose after everything she put everybody through. That to me, because it's what, like, I'm talking about it now, and I'm like, I need to go rewatch that again. Once every
and this is the time to do it.
Now's a great time to watch.
You could have
to watch movies.
Yeah, you could have like a little, mob movie marathon. You got your Casino, your Goodfellas. You could kind of dip into some of the Ocean's 11 type films.
Yeah.
You've got the Irishman and a lot of the Scorsese movies.
I liked The Irishman. I didn't love it. I thought I'd like it a little bit better. I think it's just the length. The length was a little bit too. Yeah.
I loved all the characters being brought together, and that's one of the fun things when you watch a lot of these actors, and even when you going into The Sopranos, which my wife and I got a chance to rewatch from the season 1 up until the end about a year or so ago.
Such a good show.
You got all these great cameos, and you just kind of watch it, and it just again, it's not, you don't want to glorify the crime and the violence, but these characters, it's a drama and it's a story, and when you have these types of stories that you can identify with people who are characters, again, not the killers and not the murderers.
Right. We have to keep putting those disclaimers on the bottom there. Yeah.
Growing up in New York and being Italian, you just, the mannerisms that they give, people that I grew up with and family and friends, and I'm like, it's so authentic. And so it's the type of thing where I really appreciate that. It makes me feel a little more like I'm at home.
Well, I'll tell you, the funny thing is, I mean, I grew up around that. You might have as well, growing up in Staten Island.
I have family on Staten Island for sure. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of know, I knew where John Gotti's brother's house was when we went over up on Toad Hill. You can see if you drive too slow past the house, the little camera would follow you. I mean, it's pretty incredible. It's like the last time I was in Staten Island, which was right before this pandemic hit. I went to the grocery store, and these two ladies were talking, and they were loud because, disclaimer, people from New York are pretty loud.
Right.
And this lady said something, and the other lady said something, and she goes, "Oh, Marone." It's like, oh man, you don't hear that anywhere, but pretty much Staten Island and maybe Long Island too. So
yeah, I'm teaching some of the the different terms and words to my daughter, because she grew up, this is my stepdaughter, but she's my daughter, as I feel. And so she grew up in Ohio, and, a lot of these kind of mannerisms, talking with my hands, and it's not as normal for folks in Ohio or in the Midwest
or anywhere outside of New York.
Why are you so loud? I'm like, I'm not loud. that's just how I talk.
Yep. Yeah.
We're talking now. We're excited.
It's funny because I had a friend from the Midwest. First time I brought them to New York, we went out to a restaurant. They go, "Why is everybody yelling at each other?" I'm like, "They're not. That's just how they talk. No one's really mad at each other. That's how they're talking."
We're emotionally charged, and
yes,
we want to sometimes we want to get our point across, but even then, I think it's you've got the politeness of hey, forget about that sort of thing.
It's kind of endearing, actually. Listen, Derek, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today about CY Club, Second Date Social. There's a lot of other things. We're going to check back in with you, especially when you have an update on Second Date Social. I want to hear about that.
Yes.
You're doing an incredible job for the city of Columbus, for people that are coming in, not knowing anybody, for people like myself that want to start, now that I'm kind of settled here and want to start getting involved. I appreciated you back in January taking the time talking with me about the different ways to get involved. And as soon as everything's back to normal, I'll be pushing you on that as well. So really appreciate what you're doing, and keep on doing it. And thanks for giving not just people that are listening, but also people that may live in other cities, other states that are maybe frustrated that their YP clubs aren't working out, or maybe want to figure out how to engage their members a little bit better. Hopefully this gave them a little bit of insight into how to do it and how to do it successfully.
Absolutely. And I encourage them to find me on LinkedIn. If you have questions, I'm always happy to lend a little bit of advice to some of these fellow YP organizations now or into the future. So thank you.
Awesome. All right, Derek, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's a wrap on this episode of Just Press Pause. Big shout out and thank you to Derek Grosso, CEO of the Columbus Young Professionals Club, for joining me as today's guest. For more information on the organization, please visit cypclub.com. All of the links in today's episode are listed in the description section of the YouTube video. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do. It's youtube.com/Andrew Kozak TV. Just Press Pause can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Deezer, and about a half a dozen others. Thanks for watching and listening. Stay tuned for episode 8 next.